Welcome to the voice of mountain sledding, the Mountain Sledder Podcast with Mike Reed.
I'm very excited to be sitting down with my good buddy today, Reagan Sieg, the OG of snowbike riding in the backcountry, let's say. Reagan, how did you even get started in snowbiking?
How did I get started in snowbiking? Well, I guess it really all starts with my involvement with dirt biking first. And I mean, I've grown up as a, passionate dirt bike rider. I always wanted to be on my dirt bike. That led me into racing motocross. I did many years of that, working up my skills, going through the ranks. From there, as I was a kid, racing was the thing to do. But when I hit about 19, thing called freestyle came around, and
you did that.
yeah, it kind of tickled my fancy. So I jumped both feet into the freestyle world and kind of left racing at that point. So
yeah,
everything towards snowbiking, I think, has been the lead up of my whole life. I've done a lot of different things, and I grew up on snowmobiles as well. So I have this whole, love for motorsports, dirt bikes. I have a love for snowmobiling in the winter backcountry, and in about 2011 or just before is when the first timber sled snowbike came onto the market, and that was really the first snow bike that interested my mind because it was made up of snowmobile technology, and a lot of things before that hadn't quite ticked all the boxes for me. So
right.
Being a guy in motorsports and dirt bikes and everything that's done so much and opened my mind to new opportunities, I think this kind of came along. I had a lot of dreams in this direction of riding a dirt bike on the snow. It's kind of like my idea of where free riding would only happen in Canada. So seeing the stars kind of align and kind of putting together in my mind that it might be now or never if I want to be at the head of the snowbike industry, if it was ever going to happen, as in 2011, I decided to jump both feet in and take all my skills, my location and everything, and put all effort into this industry I have been dreaming about.
How cool was it? Because, and thanks so much for that opener, because you just drummed up 30 years of experience or 40 years of experience all in 15 seconds. So thanks for doing that.
Yeah, in case you wanted to know all that.
That was just a fast forward. How cool was it to see a sport develop? Because okay, you were in motocross racing, which is such deep history, throughout
already
North America.
Just established.
Very established. Sure. And then you go into freestyle, which had its infancy as well in the 90s, and you started seeing Pastrana and the X Games and things like that come about, and it started really gaining culture. It was really cool. But then snowbike was truly a whole new avenue, you're saying, everyone dreamed that for the longest time when they're sledding through the 80s and 90s. It's could you imagine if you had gears, you could take a bike and get up there and everything? And I think it was always, there was limitations with technology, the power, would it ever withstand it? Is the track and everything existing? But this sport, like you mentioned, 2011, really sparked from nowhere, it came out of the woodwork.
Well, it definitely didn't have any traction. There'd been lots of people that had tried, to make some kind of snow bike over the years. It never did really take traction. I kind of take a little bit of credit from me jumping out in the freestyle world, because the freestyle world was very, new in that infancy too, when I was kind of going that direction. So, there was no freestyle when I was younger, so it was only racing. But when freestyle came in front of me, it wasn't a normal thing. So I did realize that it kind of fit in between what I like to do. I did like to jump. I like to push my limits a little bit. And I found there was a way to make money, and it was a totally different way to make money behind bars. So I had to adjust what I was doing in life and figure it out that I was going to chase that down. And it just it opened so many doors for me, and, got me into the whole US culture of everything and Mike Metzger and all that. But really it was the recipe of jumping out into something new that then proved how neat it was to be, in a small amount of people doing something new. So when snowbiking did come around and I had these questions for myself, I did lean back on my freestyle experience, because it was all very new. It was kind of the same feeling, am I really going to chase this down? Is it really a thing? So I really had to put my effort forward and know that, you're never going to be the first guy. Nobody's going to show you the way. So if you really do want to do something new, you truly do have to trust your instincts and maybe trust the products that are in front of you and your vision, and go forward. And really, I jumped both feet in because I wanted it so bad that I was willing to do almost anything to make this sport go forward.
That's so cool. So your infancy in freestyle motocross, being an OG on that aspect, really helped snowbiking to build to what it is today.
It did. And I mean, I know in my mind, freestyle wasn't something that was going to be forever because let's face it, it's jumping ramps. You're in all kinds of weird scenarios. You're just jumping and jumping and jumping. Your career can end pretty fast. It was never expected that it was going to take over my whole life. It took me so many places. It's amazing. But at the same route, I was always, open-minded to what was the next step going to be. Is there another step? Do I stay with freestyle or, is something else going to open up? But I mean, yeah, the wanting the dream and learning that freestyle was a dream and it did establish to something really helped me on the snow bike thing. Cause
Not that it was a
what
dead
was
end
hard
path.
to think of back then is, all in place now because of efforts that I put in and other people have put in and the products and everything. And it's grown and like, look at where we are now. All of a sudden snow bikes are just a common thing. And, they work really quite well. The whole industry is still growing. It's exciting. And it's been an exciting ride for just over a decade. That's for sure.
In its early days, the 2011, what was the biggest hang up with technology then versus what you're currently riding for a kit on a snow bike? Like, what do you think the early kits lacked versus what the new kits have?
So when I got on my first timber sled kit, I did buy it without even throwing a leg over one. So it was kind of a decision on my programs that I had. I had snowmobiles with my dealer and that program kind of fizzled out to nothing. And it was at the same time the snow bike was coming up. So I had a quick decision to make. Am I going to buy a snowmobile right at this time and get back in the snowmobile, or am I going to try a new industry? And, at that time, I just decided I'm going to try it. It was because it was snowmobile technology and the skid that really made me comfortable with saying, well, it's now or never. Let's just get on it and see where it goes. I had talked to Brock Hoyer at that time, and he had already had a timber sled when I was making my decisions. And even though I had not tried one, I just picked on what he had to say about it. And we're both very like-minded people. So I did take a little bit of what he had to say, and I just jumped in both feet to get into this industry to move forward. The
thing that I find with when you first started introducing them and we started filming together and things like that was like they felt heavy and kind of clunky. And nowadays they feel playful and way lighter than they ever were. And is that kind of what you see too? Like nowadays it's like, oh man, I'm doing stuff that you wouldn't have been able to do in 2011.
So getting on the track kits at first, the track kit actually worked quite well. It just took you right off trail to the trees. It was an amazing feeling because you didn't get the same feedback from a snowmobile and you didn't have to prepare for certain things. But the biggest downfall was the ski. Without steering, you can't go very fast. Without steering, you hit the ground on the trail. And that was our challenge is we were using snowmobile technology for skis still. And most of those do not have say outside runners. Sleds mostly sit on their own on the trail. They have a center runner. The Simmons double carbide ski was about the best you could get. It was 6 inches wide. It had edges on the outside. So for a snow bike, we do need an edge on the outside in order to lean over, or else as soon as you get to plastic, you're going to crash. So the biggest challenge with skis, we started with the 6-inch Simmons, and it got you up the trail, but it did not float in the backcountry. I tried jumping lots. I came home with whiplash every day. The track kit was getting me where I needed to be. The ski was not performing to the level I needed it to. We went to a wider Simmons ski, slightly better in the powder, even worse on the trail. It was like going to battle, leaving the parking lot to go into the backcountry just to make it up the trail.
I remember some of those early years where it was a chore for you, who's a great motocross rider, great bike rider, to get up the trail. I remember watching you just fight that thing. If it was a hard, crusty trail and you couldn't just ride the edge, it was painful to watch you.
It took some skill and you really had to have the want back then to take the challenges and roll with them. Not everything was simple. Maybe that's what some of the fun was. I don't really know, but the trail was deadly and we used to laugh about it. And me and my buddy would see how many times each of us would hit the ground, and we try to laugh about it if no parts were broken by the time we got up there. But that in my mind was really the thing, is the track kit right away had that feel of oh, we're going somewhere. But then the steering was the challenge. So, me not knowing how to explain that back then, but watching how it went forward now is, the day that the three carbide 3-runner ski was developed by Timber Sled, and it had a center runner that was taller. So when you're on the hard pack trail, it was a very small contact point, felt like a dirt bike tire. You could lean it without anything else touching. So it started to lean good on the trail. But the real key was it had two outside runners that were a little lower down, but lots of bite on the outside and a lot of flotation. So the first day I was given this ski, I literally went in the backcountry and tested it. And it was the first, jump through the trees that I saw. I was like, well, let's start right here. And it was already bigger than anything I could jump before. Even if I could jump something with the current skis I had before, there was no turning or control after, or probably flotation when I landed. So This was a good test. It was a hallway through the trees. You had to turn a little bit. If anything went wrong, you're flying into the trees. It was kind of technical for back then. I hit the first jump and the front end handling was so much better.
This episode of the Mountain Sledder Podcast is brought to you by Mountain Sports Distribution and ShopMSD.com, your source for top brands in sledding and powersports. From 509 to Highmark, Tobe to CFR, and their exclusive line of Mountain Lab gear, MSD is where you can find products tailored to meet the needs of serious backcountry powersports users. Mountain Sports Distribution has constantly been expanding their line of products each year, and I always look forward to what comes out next. From a custom Mountain Lab toolkit which contains everything needed no matter what brand you ride, to super bright headlamps and even gear bags and tie-downs, any outerwear and safety gear you need for riding, basically everything you'll need in a day of riding, you'll find at shopmsd.com. Upgrade your riding experience this season by visiting shopmsd.com. Top quality brands for your backcountry adventures.
Yeah, so we got that first jump lined up and done, and it was completely 100% a different feeling than what I deal with the other skis. So it just sparked this interest in my mind, and I just started pushing that ski off of all kinds of stuff. So now it wasn't just jumping straight through the trees. Let's try some off-camber stuff. Let's try some hips. Let's try some double drops. I just cleaned everything I could throw at it that day and literally felt like I just added so much progression to the sport right there. But not just me, obviously. I didn't make the ski. Timbersled and Alan Mangum made the ski, and what they did was just such a leap in the snowbike industry. So that was a big part, is getting that handling better on the snowbike. So then we could circle back and look at, well, what now can we improve on the actual track kit?
Right. Yeah, and it seems like you guys are going the right direction. I mean, now you're riding a 3 1/4, 12-inch wide skid, right? And then it seems like your ski is just dialed now. Like when you ride it, it looks like it doesn't do anything where it doesn't lack, like it doesn't short you in any way. It's not like you're fighting anything. Like the trail looks way smoother. Deep snow looks good. When you're doing like big airs, it looks fine. So it seems like you guys got them like pretty dialed now. It's
really about trying to make a well-rounded package, right? So, you don't want to only be good in the powder and really suck on the trail and everything like that. So over the years, it's like any quirk that wasn't 100%, then you try to focus on that, right? And over my years, I mean, I went from fumbling up the trails to trying to keep up to the sleds on the trails to ultimately wanting to win the trail, right? Yeah. So, I mean, you've seen it over the years. Like you see, there's days where the trail's rough and it's, it evens out the playing field, and I'm on the gas, I'm avoiding bumps, I'm kind of racing with you guys and Borchers and whoever wants to rally down. And, I've shown that the snowbike can keep some speed on a long trail ride. And, that's half the fun for me too, is being able to bang bars a little bit, not just ride something that we can't make look that good. So over the years, we had wider tracks, we've had skinnier tracks, longer tracks, shorter tracks, bigger lugs, shorter lugs. So we've learned a lot through all that. And we've settled out now, the current kit that I'm riding, the Mountaintop, it's settled in at a 12-inch wide track. We got 126 for length and 3 1/4-inch paddles is what we're doing right now, with a 3.5 spacing. So tall paddles, a little bit more gap in between them, so we just don't have too many paddles. And the recipe is wild. We've made a very balanced platform, I guess I'd say. Every little bit of rider input does something. Our older kits were kind of like more of a torpedo. It didn't matter what you did, they just did their thing.
You're going straight, yeah.
If I lean back and turn the gas, this thing's wheeling. If I let off the gas, it settles in forward. Every little input now, with how everything's balanced, has a reaction, which is fun for a rider because it feels more like dirt bike riding,
right?
Not like riding some awkward machine out there.
Yeah, it looks good. And it truly does look like, I think, what you envisioned, in the early 2000s, late 90s, whatever, when you're riding freestyle moto and you're like, man, this would be so sweet to tie in, because you're a badass sledder and you grew up around the backcountry. To tie those two sports together, I think you finally got it to that point, or it feels like anyway now to me. When I watch it, it's like, you guys have got it figured.
Well, yeah, I think my mission statement was kind of to be like, if I had a single ski dirt bike machine that could ride the snow covered backcountry, what would I do with that machine with the rules that a single ski machine would do? And that's really where my overall vision was. And I had to check a lot of boxes to be happy with that, because let's face it, we came off of snowmobiles. Snowmobiles were rad. Snow bikes are underpowered and inefficient back in the day, but creating all those efficiencies and the handling characteristics and the bikes getting better and just all the knowledge we have up to now. Like you say, you watch me, I go into the backcountry, I read the backcountry, we point things out and we attack it. We film very efficiently. We do
unreal
neat things, a lot, and things are new always too. So everything seems to be fun. I just love what the snow bike has to offer and how free the backcountry feels. I'm not going to be grabbing fifth gear, hitting 90-mile-an-hour track speed at a jump. That's not a snow bike. It's just not quite there yet. But I think, we've played with everything, big bore bikes, turbos, this and that. And we push the limits as much as we can. And, always still hungry to figure out what the next step is and what else we can do out there.
We've been filming for a while now. And one question that I always get from people who haven't been on snow bikes or even have been around sleds a bit is just like, well, he can't keep up in the deep snow, right? And I was laughing and just remembering like times we've been up sail. And I think Cody and I were on like 174s from riders at the time, a couple of demos, and like blasting up sail. And it was like probably literally 3 feet of snow overnight. So just super deep. And we're trying to break trail up through the trees. And here you are, maybe not going straight up everything like we know snow bikes don't do great at, but like right alongside us. Like as we're rallying up through the trees, here you are up like right alongside. You look over and there's Reagan, like, and I think at that time you were on a turbo bike or something. It was getting wild, but it's just like still like they go places and they do so well no matter how deep the snow is. It's crazy.
It seems like they can deal with most of the snow packs, what the backcountry has to offer nowadays. And like you say, like there are some incredibly deep snow days and people are just like, how do you even get out there? And that's not, there's days that I have to be a bit smarter for sure.
Yeah.
But tell me how many days there were where you guys actually had to babysit me and help me get somewhere and all that. If I can't get straight up, I'm just going to take a different line. I look at angles on the mountains. And there's lots of times where we're filming where we all see a pillow or a jump or a feature that's on a hill and it's hard to get to by everybody. Snowmobiles, snow bikes and everything. And if I can look at the right angles and I can just see it in my mind, a lot of times I can get into that tight scenario by side hilling or whatever. And I get there. And
you make it happen. That's the neat
part about it. You just got to look at it a little bit different with the snow bike.
So nowadays when I get asked that, I just kind of laugh a bit. I'm like, man, like if anything, we're following his track, or like the first time we were same day in sail. And it was super deep and you kind of went down and we looked at this draw and we couldn't hit it. So you were kind of turning out and got stuck a little bit. And I was like, oh shoot, like what are we going to do here? Not being around a snow bike ever, getting it unstuck or anything. And you're like, well, just pack down the front end a little bit. Like there's no running boards to get hung up. So you're like, I just need like a little track. And it wasn't even a ski pull. I think we just like packed it down a bit and you just rode away. And I was like, what? This thing could just go anywhere.
Yeah.
It was wild.
Yeah, it is. It is pretty amazing. I mean, it is very rare for me to pull out a shovel to get a snow bike unstuck. Like say, it doesn't have the surface area that's all stuck on the snow. So even if I make a mistake and I get kind of stuck or trenched down or immobile, I mean, for a snow bike, if I walk 10 feet straight in front of it and 10 feet and straight back on the other side of it, I mean, I've just pretty much made a launch pad for that thing. Very easy. So once I've just wrapped it out of the snow a tiny bit to get on what I just walked, it's just ready to go. So I just jump back on it and take off with a little bit of speed in the launch pad. So I think just being smart with the snow bike really helps. You not fight the whole platform. There's some smart ways to do things. And even when you are stuck, not to trench the bike in, you can just push it over in the snow and it actually pivots in a circle really quite easy. If it's trenched right in, it gets a little harder to move it around. But if you're not making it and you just kind of give up, you could just push your bike right on its side, turn it 90 degrees and you're ready to pick it up and ride right away. So you'll see me do that sometimes. If I'm all out of shape and I just know I just not getting the line, I'll just stop right there and give my ski a tug and just change the angle and I'm just ready to go instead of like, weeding it right into the tree well, hoping I'm going to make it. And then all of a sudden I'm really in a pickle.
Well, on a sled, you'd be waiting for 2 or 3 of your buddies in those sorts of situations to come help pull your bumper out. A couple of years ago, we were filming a really cool segment for 509 where you had a cool concept. You had basically 3 built bikes And we just took like myself and Cody and you first day, and then it was you and Cody and Riley, Suhan day 2, and basically putting like really good, capable snowmobilers on snow bikes and just seeing how that would work, right? You and I had this fun concept of just being like, well, let's just go have fun and see what happens.
Yeah.
And I think it was a great success. I think like we all had like, we're just grinning all day. It was just a ton of fun. It was a great edit. But it wasn't even like a huge struggle either. And I think that was what was proven in this edit, was just like anyone can kind of hop on these things as long as you're fairly proficient on a bike, whether that's a street bike or a dirt bike or dual sport or whatever. It's like you can get around pretty capably through the backcountry on a snow bike.
Oh, 100%. And I mean, I think the funniest part about that whole scenario that we did there was no time for anybody to practice. We were able to drive way up the mountain, and we literally parked at the cup block, and from there,
you're chewing.
It was just fairly tight, treacherous, uncharted backcountry that we had to get around. Yeah. I didn't know what we were going to get into other than Google Maps, and you guys didn't really either. But the only time you guys had to feel out the bikes was while I was trying to search out some kind of route, and then we went in the trees. And I mean, it was some of the hardest conditions I had dealt with a snow bike, with the amount of ice that was in between the trees and how tight they were and how low the snow was on that sunny, windy side. So it was funny, and it was a challenge at the same time. Played off for a great day because everybody did make it through. We did show some of the challenges, but I mean, they're all pretty minor. Yeah. And everybody had a great day with it. And that's really what the goal was.
Yeah. I'm big enough to admit that you had to ride my bike up a 50-foot stretch or 150-foot stretch or whatever to get with. I was just like, because you're right. Like, we could still see the trucks. It was like 15 minutes into the day, and we go through this like tight section that you are not having a great time with. And I was like, you know what? You take this brand new 450 from Riders and like you ride it through there, get it up. And then, but when we finally did break up in the Alpine, it was just like, that was so sweet because then it was like, third gear off wind lips and all of us were dropping into stuff and then just carving down together. It was like we'd been on these things for 10 years together. Like, it was just a ton of fun.
And that is the neat thing with snow biking. And now that I've been in it for 12 plus years, it's like I've been a dealer, I've been a sales rep, I've been through all this, and I've been around a very diverse amount of people. And I love that, you can have a very diverse group and have a great time, because you get the people that are more rookies and the people that are younger or older, and they can all ride together. And the snow bike doesn't really separate those people quite as much. And I find that you can have a very fun ride with just this random group of people. Whereas I do find snowmobiling, kind of sets people apart fitness wise, and, their overall, experience on a snowmobile can, dictate how their day goes a little bit and how certain groups work together. So
yeah, no, you're right.
Just love coming back to the truck on the snow bike every day and having this genuine, 13-year-old kid smile ear to ear for certain reasons of the day. It seemed like every ride, there's different reasons why we're so happy with what we did that day. So
the day one, like we were discussing, was just like a new zone that you'd never been to before, and you just basically pull up Google Earth, which you're famous for, you love. And I think there's a lot of listeners out there that do that too, where they were, Google Earth or whatever, Google Maps, and they pull it up and they're trying to like scope, I think through that drainage and maybe we can link that up. And it's really cool about exploring. I personally think that's where snow bikes for me shine so well, that it's just like, if you want to go and cut across this pretty aggressive side hill, which would be for a sled, you'd have to be a very experienced rider to get through there. On a bike, it's just like it cuts really well. Like, for instance, when we're filming, I'll have a tripod and a camera in one hand. I'll hop on the back of your bike, sit side saddle, and we'll just cruise through the backcountry until we see another line to film. And it's just like, you could never do that on a sled. You'd just be like falling off everywhere.
Yeah, I can just cut you right into a side hill and place you right into a steep section by going sideways. That's doubling, you barely hanging on. And I'm like, okay, off now. And you just step off and I go down and get ready for the run. And you're right there on a hillside that maybe you couldn't stop your sled on or something like that, or we move around. But
yeah, it's crazy. Like where you're really fighting a tripod of a sled, the two skis in front of a sled and the track behind, you're really fighting that on a steep side hill and, a little bit more crustier snow or whatever. And you're just like, your shoulders are burnt up, your lower back's burnt up by the end of the day. On the bike, it's just like, you are just literally sitting and cruising through that sort of stuff where it's not nearly as aggressive as a sled.
Yeah, the amount of direct traction you have with the snow bike, I think only having the one contact point in the front, that would be any sort of drag, and the fact that it actually paves the way for the track through the powder it always gives the track something to kind of run onto. So even when you're parked in the middle of a meadow, it's way steep. You think, some people's conception is you just got to pin that snow bike to just get going. I'm like literally with our kits nowadays, you just let out the clutch and it just starts moving forward. And you decide how hard you want to be on it, get on the gas or just kind of cruise around a little bit. And they have such an amazing amount of traction and an ability to go at angles. Don't always point straight up hills at a snow bike. I always just look at things at an angle, because if you're not able to go up anymore while you're going at an angle, it is just so easy to change your direction. But when you're pointed straight up and you don't get your turn in time, that's when you trench in. So
right. Yeah, it always seems like you're working different angles on the hill, whereas a sled, it's so much fun just to use the horsepower and track speed to just go straight up stuff. Because that's where a sled really shines. You get the skis in the air and you're having a bunch of fun with a 180 to 200 horse sled. It's like, well, that's a lot of fun. But on a snow bike, it's like you still are a bit limited on horsepower with a 450, aren't you?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I would take more and more and more power if I could get it in the same weight class. But I mean, we have some gives and takes for this platform, but it's absolutely exhilarating where they get us to. So it really is just about planning. And the Google Earth thing for me is just like, I love imprinting the mountains in my mind, but I don't like cheating all the time by like using a GPS. So I like imprinting things and I like having plans, but I still like going in the backcountry kind of cowboy. And if I end up at a drainage that I'm like, oh, I think this goes down to a road, I Google Earthed it. What do you think, guys? You guys going to go all the way back around, or you want to take my shortcut down to the road? It's entertaining. Sometimes those routes work out so good and you're like, oh, I can use that route again next time. And sometimes you're like, yeah, sorry guys, it didn't look that bad on Google Earth. We made it, but we might not do it again.
Last year, early season, we went up sail and it was Riley and Cody and you and I, and all three of us were on sleds. You were on your snow bike. And at the end of the day, we were like, I think we knew there was a way to get back down to the trucks, but that early season snow is so low. There's a creek we had to navigate through. And as we got down closer to that creek, it would become very evident that it was just like, we were never going to get down to the trucks that way.
It was December still, wasn't it?
No, that was November. That was early November, when we were down there.
Even. And we were thinking we were going to drop half mountain to get out a shortcut.
When you heard all the radio chatter of us just pickled in these creeks, well, you and I actually went down towards the creek. I think we had to jump it and get back. But like when you were hearing the radio chatter from the sleds, were you just like, oh, you poor guys, like, and you just cruised?
Well, I know I can snake through things a little bit nicer, but I mean, I know you guys got the power and the traction, but I mean, it got tight, it got willowy, we got hammered right into the boulders that had no clean lines, and then your creek holes and stuff to boot down there. So there wasn't a lot of places for us to turn around.
No, there wasn't
a lot of places for us to see a line going up. So it all got very cowboy very fast. But all we did was laugh at that point, and there's just some good times, and that's when filming turns into more camaraderie, right? We're no longer filming, we're now trying to get ourselves out of the hole we got ourselves in.
I must admit, riding with you when we're doing missions like that, there's like a certain bit of confidence I have to know that you could pickle your way to find me to get my sled, righted or pointed the right direction or whatever. Whereas like other sleds aren't guaranteed to be able to follow that same trench line through those tight trees to get to you efficiently. Whereas the bike's like, Reagan will get there eventually, and
that's what
most good riders on a sled will eventually kind of get there, but man, would they have to work through other trenches to get there. Whereas again, the bike will be like, he'll show up eventually, he'll be here. And you did. And that was up that creek, and we got my sled kind of ready, and then there's rocks on the other side. It was not easy, but we did it.
Yeah, I found from my sledding days, if somebody was really in a pickle, you tend to be off by yourselves a little bit. And then you're like, oh, I'm over here stuck. Someone come give me a hand. And they're kind of looking at where I went. And they're like, I don't know if I can quite get to where you are. And then maybe they end up getting stuck trying to get there.
Yeah.
Whereas I do find the bike is kind of the scalpel. So in those kind of situations, whether it's a bike or a sled stuck, I find I can normally just weasel right in there, no problem. Because if one's fit through, another one will fit through, whether I follow the track or I pick a different line. So whether I'm, helping another snow biker, I just tell people, you know what, before you're sitting there struggling yourself, just get on the radio, because it is so easy for us to just come right into where you are, no matter the situation, give you a hand. You're out of there in 2 seconds instead of fighting it yourself, toppled over into a tree well. But the bikes are efficient for just snaking into things like that.
In Canada, I might be a little bit biased up here, but there's 3 big names that come to mind when we talk snow biking, and it's Cody Matichuk, Brock Hoyer, and yourself. Is there anyone else that stands out right now doing stuff on snow bikes where you're like, man, watch these kids? watch these guys coming up or whoever they are, like down in the States or whatever. Who else is out there you think pioneering the sport like you three are?
Well, we definitely got a new kid on the block now. The Mission Missile, they call him. He's a youngster. He's been up and coming racing. Blake Davies, and he's only about 15 right now. He's bigger than me. He's bigger than you. He is a big boy. He is just a tall, super nice kid. He's been on the mountaintop now for this will be at least his second season. I met him last year. I didn't really know much about him, but I'd heard lots of good things about him, from race people and families, just saying that this kid is just, above and beyond most people in his class. And he's just, nicest kid ever. So when I got the chance to ride with him last year, I didn't really know much of his background. I just started leading him into things like, this is what I see right now. I'm going to go roll into 2 hips. Are you behind me or not? And you know what? He was behind me for everything.
No way.
You didn't have to sit there and teach him much of anything. He was just a sponge riding. And, he was 14 years old last year, and it's amazing. And you look at him this year, he's even more established and more, can look after himself. He's got his own mind in the backcountry. It's really fun riding with someone like that, and just seeing that he has this eagerness and his own style of riding. He's not just focused on what I do and then try to copy me. No, he's doing it his way. So it's really neat to see. I love pushing people like that forward and helping them out. So.
The one thing that becomes very evident when you ride with new sledders is how much time they spent in the backcountry, because to maybe guys like you and I who kind of grew up in the backcountry snowmobiling and snowbiking, you come into a bowl and you immediately know, oh, that's going to be a soft area, but then where the wind swept over here gets a little bit harder, and you kind of just know by looking at the snow, just from spending enough time in there, what's going to be areas you want to go play in, other areas it'll be harder, and that sort of thing. Do you find, did he grow up on a sled or in the backcountry to understand that, or how did he get so good on the snow so quick, do you find?
I don't know his overall snow background. All I see is that he kind of grew up on motorcycles. Most people that don't, focus on a lot of other things. If you're racing in the winter and all that, it's motorcycles. I spent time on snowmobiles more. I mean, I grew up on snowmobiles, but when I was, doing freestyle and I was making money and I was making enough money to live, then of course, and I had this money to then snowmobile more. And when I had enough money, snowmobiling was the thing I wanted to do in my off time. And it was just, I loved it. I don't know if that's Blake's background at all. I really think his motorcycle skill has just crossed over in the snow.
Wow.
There's always something to learn in the snow, but like you and me understand that if you're 15, you haven't had all these life experiences. So, he's got to be paying attention. He's got to be absorbing it all. He's not a liability out there. It's just really cool. Easy to deal with. It's great to see. You would never guess he's 15 years old by the size of him. But,
when I get asked by friends all the time, because we ride in the summertime, we'll get into your success that you've had riding single track and your summer program lately. But I get asked all the time, like, oh, should I throw a snow bike kit on my 450 or my 300 two-stroke is even a more common question I get asked, because lots of guys like riding the 300s in the cross country that we do up here. And I keep going things are designed, nothing in life you find is this the Swiss Army knife where it's really good at this and it's really good at that. Do you find setting up your bike like a good 450 out of the crate with a good mountaintop kit is purpose built for the backcountry, but it's really hard to then turn that into an awesome summer bike as well? Or do you have a good system now where you got really good in winter and that same machine could be really good in the summer?
Well, I think stock bikes have come quite a way in the last couple of years. So last year I did have a stock 22 KTM XCF, and then I also have other bikes that are mod and everything. I did have great success with that stock bike. It was the most reliable and the smoothest out of all my bikes. So there is something to be said about that. It did a great job for me. I always do want a mod bike. I like feeling like I have an edge on people. I'm always wanting to push this sport forward. I always want more power. But sometimes with mods, there's also human error, and it's not really what it's intended to. Sometimes those bikes don't last as long, or, stuff goes wrong. It is what it is. It can happen with a stock bike too. But I mean, a stock bike with a stock kit nowadays, you have quite a few options, and a lot of technology is pretty good. You can have a great time with a stock bike. But when I say stock bike, you're still going to be adding stuff because you're not going into the backcountry with nothing added to that. So you're still going to think about a handful of add-ons, which takes time, depending on who you are and what you like. And, I really like to go through my snow bikes. I'm very specific with certain things. And, I want my stuff to feel very normal to me when I'm riding it. So I'll do whatever I have to make it happen. Makes it a little harder to change over if you put a lot of effort into your bike for the winter to put it into the summer, but it's totally doable.
Nice.
It just totally depends how far you've gone.
Do you think the 454 stroke is the best platform for a snow bike out of the box?
I mean, I personally gave up riding 2 strokes quite a while ago. Even with freestyle, I stopped riding them. I was riding 4 strokes. I don't really care for mixing gas. I like putting straight gas in. 2 strokes have come a long ways. I just haven't spent a lot of time on them. As far as snow biking goes, I say ride what you got, to first get into the sport anyways. You got a 300, that's the only bike you got, you love it. You can throw a kit on it, have a great time. You might ride that for a few years. You might decide that you love the sport, you want a 450 in the future and go that way. But I mean, the only way to figure out what you like is to start somewhere. And if, the bike you got is the right one, then that's what you use to get out there and start having a good time. Whether it's lower on power or whatever, it will still get you out there. I guarantee you, you're going to get to the top of the mountain. You're going to see those views. And you're going to figure out if this is for you and you want to keep doing this.
That's good advice, Reeg. What are the bare necessity essentials that you got to kit out a bike with, no matter if it is a 300 or 450 or whatever you're running? You always have like a little tidy tank, fuel tank on the back. You got your hand guards on. What else do you run?
Yeah, hand guards and stuff. Those are, saving your hands from the elements. And if you hit trees, we're in and out of the brush all the time. But we're adding headlights if you don't have a headlight, safety factors, getting in and out of the mountains. As far as runnability for the bikes, it does help to keep them warm. If they're cold all the time, they can overfuel. None of these bikes were designed to be in snow 24/7. So we're putting engine jackets on them to try to keep them warmer, and keep the snow out. We put a thermostat system on them because a lot of race bikes don't have a thermostat system. So they're just free flowing current coolant a lot, which doesn't give it a real chance to heat up in the elements. So the thermostat can help heat up the small loop. We also bypass the loop up into our handlebars to have coolant heated handlebars because a lot of the race bikes don't have a lot of extra power on them to run heated grips or something like that. And then beyond that, we're then looking at the intake. So are we keeping snow off of the intake? Part of the engine jackets do some of that job. We're running different filters. We're not running stock intakes. No foam. We're just running like a winter pre-filter cover that keeps the snow out, but doesn't starve the motor when it freezes and stuff like that. So, and then from there on, it's just a lot of then personal preference. I like wider foot pegs. They're a little bit longer. Just better surface area. If you get any ice build up, it's just not an issue. I get a longer shifter a lot of times, just makes that a little bit easier. We add skid plates. It just deflects some snow, blocks the shifter from getting hit with heavy snow and blocks your feet from getting pulled off. And, I even go down to the fact of like all these kits do come with a handbrake nowadays, but,
Right.
I like to go to the extra level of like, I like a handbrake, but at the same route, it's on the right side on our bike, which you're using a throttle and a brake at the same time. That's great for someone that wants to be, a little bit more lethargic on how they control their bike. Me, I like a lot of control. So I add a foot brake along with the hand brake, and they both do the same job so that I just have options when I'm out there. Because I really like controlling my bikes more than the average person. And sometimes it's hard when you're twisting the throttle and you want to dab brakes at the same time and you got it all on your hands. So
We get spoiled when I hop on your bike just to try it because everything's already done for me. And I'm like, this thing just feels comfortable, to have the foot brake and the hand guards and the heated handlebars and everything else. And it's just like, and you mentioned like, well, the race bikes don't have enough power to run an electronic, heat system for the handlebar. But it's like, why not run the coolant through it anyway? It's like way more efficient to do. And your bars are like constantly hot. It's awesome. So I think it's the way to do it.
And if your hands ever get too hot, your bike's probably overheating at that point too, and you better pay attention.
Take it easy on it.
But even little things like having, a temperature gauge to give you an idea where your bike's at, it helps out a little bit because these bikes just aren't built to be in the snow. So it helps you kind of manage things a little bit. And all the little tricks, right? It's just like anything as you get time. Anything that you think is not perfect, well, how do we slowly figure out what's the right answer? And, when it comes to hand and foot brakes and stuff, I've pushed out, I've tried different things. Now this year I've tried something new. It's called an aux brake setup, and the two systems are separate but work together. I've tried the Recluse left-handed brake before and put it on the right-hand side and had mixed reviews. So I'm just trying to find the right answer for people too, and kind of check off all these little boxes. You can get around the backcountry with one brake, but I mean, honestly, they both have their place, I find, and my right answer is to have both. So it's little things like that I get hung up on. I try to, work them out. I share that information with my team and stuff like that. So if I find any ideas or anything like that, I get to go right back to Mountaintop and Alan. I get to explain to him my findings. We talk it out. We decide where we're moving from there, and it's a fun process.
They must be pretty happy to have a person like you on the team to help that R&D process, to say like, I put, however many hours on the bike this year. This is what's been working. This is where we find some faults. This is where we need to put more engineering into. Like it must help accelerate the sport. Because like I mentioned, from like 2011 to today, the bikes to me seem and feel totally different.
Yeah, it totally is great having a team that's willing to listen. And, with Mountaintop, I'm back to working with Alan. That is exactly where I started with Timber Sled. It was Alan Mangum, and now Mountaintop is with Alan again. And then Rush as our general manager. So it's a small little team. Alan and I have history. We've worked together. Things have gone great before. So it was really neat to see him kind of come back on board and open those doors for me, and us work together again. And he knows my strengths, and he has his strengths, and Rush has his strengths. It's all pretty neat, and how they feed off of me and how I feed off of them. It's fun being in that position to really feel like, all your opinion matters, and you actually have a way to help with the company and move it forward. And, we're all like-minded people. We want nothing but the best for the snowbike industry. And, everything we can do in our minds and everything we can put together in the future, we're just going to keep working hard. And
yeah, it's nice to hear. I think all listeners out there are pretty appreciative of all the work you've been putting into the snow bikes to get them to this point already, because they're pretty badass. But before that, before snow bikes, and that's where most people know you from, is, he's the OG snow biker. You were an absolutely badass sledder. And let's talk about that for a minute, because people probably don't know that about you. You grew up around the Vernon area, snowmobiling, before snow bikes were a thing, like you mentioned. But you Google search Reagan Sieg on snowmobile, and there's like this massive cliff drop that you did back in the backcountry around Vernon that is just unreal. And people don't know that you took brand new snow check sleds and you were running them to the limit. Like, you may as well have been filmed back in those days, but you were a little bit under the radar, weren't you?
Well, I think I did so much on the dirt bike end of things, and just events and traveling and everything, that snowmobiling was my release. It wasn't where I was making money. Nobody was telling me what to do. But at the same route, let's just say that I knew that there was thousands and thousands of people before me in the snowmobile industry. And how do you really set yourself apart when you're one of thousands of people trying to do the same thing? Who's going to pay Reegs to go throw a snowmobile around the backcountry is what I was saying. Nobody's really paying me to do that. I couldn't see the way to do it. I never really put effort into making snowmobile any real, job or anything. I did it for my own purposes. I loved pushing myself. I loved my buddy that I was riding with. We just wanted to take on the backcountry and ride hard. Of course, I had a motocross background, which then puts my mind and my skill together. So I just never put the effort into trying to film videos for a reason or chase down certain sponsors. I did whatever came natural with my program, but I just wasn't out there for those reasons. I was out there for the pure love of snowmobiling and pushing the limits. And most people knew when I was riding snowmobiles with me and my buddy on our little 144s ripping around the backcountry, you could tell our lines because we rode different than everybody else. We side hilled everything, and we just rode them to the extreme, blowing 2 to 3 belts a day.
Motors. How many motors did you go through in 07, did you say?
Yeah, well, I only went through a motor a year. But yeah, my 07 I had for 4 years. I had the extended warranty. And as a dirt biker, I was like, you're really going to give me warranty on this? It was the first sled I had bought brand new. So when it had warranty and everything, and I was just like, so seriously, I blow this thing up, I can just kind of drop it back off. You guys are going to fix it? To me, that was just like a free pass. Let's just go run this thing as hard as you possibly can. And when it blows up, you give it back. So in the 4 years I had this sled and I had this extended warranty, I went through a motor every year. I had clutches fly apart. Everything was warranted. I just got to laugh when things were breaking, and I got to be like, oh, well, as long as we get back to the truck, doesn't cost me nothing, and to me, it was just a fun process, as I just wasn't as scared to hang things out and push the limits and just do what I wanted to do. It wasn't, at least every time that something did go down, it wasn't, straight out of my pocketbook, but
That's right.
Sure made things fun back in the day. And I don't know, there's not a lot of things that really compare to pushing a machine to those limits and those kind of elements and everything. And yeah, just the pure enjoyment it had brought to me.
You and I have some good laughs about the old triple days and things like that when we were traveling out to go on film days. What do you think your most favorite sled was when you were in the sledding industry? Was there one like a Mountain Max or something that stood out where you're like, man, that thing just screamed?
Well, I think my '07 Rev was like my 4 years of glory on snowmobiling. I mean, it was the most fun I had. I had a really good buddy and a couple other buddies that all rode at that same time and era. And it was just the time I put the most effort into snowmobiling. I got the most memories, and it was just, the most achievements for myself that we had done, I think. Of course, I had some other sleds and some fun times, and I had an old 750 triple storm, and it pretty much went across open water better than it went across powder. So we take it down to the beach once in a while, the local beach, and just go rip up and down Okanagan Lake and have a good time. But, the sled was fun. It was one of my first personal sleds, and I thought, 750, big number. Yeah, big triple heavy thing, but whatever else. I threw it around. We had a great time. So it's all part of the process, right?
Last spring I went out and filmed and actually competed in Riley Suhan's backcountry race.
Yeah.
And was Matt Cox, did he win that?
I think Matt Cox and then Shannon, I think they both took higher times than all the sleds.
Yeah, okay.
But so I do think Matt won it.
The two snow bikes were definitely finished first and second, but it wasn't like, so Riley has consistently been one of the fastest at his own race, and shame on him for doing that. He shouldn't even be allowed to race anymore. He just goes out there and makes a ringer course for himself that he could just win. Yeah. But I mean, we all know Riley's a hell of a rider, so not exactly. To take anything from
Can't take much from him.
But then these bikes showed up, and they weren't like a few seconds faster than Riley, but they were I think the leader won by I think Matt beat him by like a minute or something. And I was like, like a few years ago, we paired you up with Turcotte, and we did the sled versus snow bike and which did which better, and we had some fun with that. It was whatever for a 509 webisode. But on this straight backcountry race, it's just timed, and you're on this course, see how well you can do. And the snow bike just killed the sleds. I couldn't believe it, how fast it was.
Well, I always would have said that if you build a race course and you don't give sleds straightaways where they can just outspeed a snow bike altogether, then the actual handling capabilities with the corners and the way we can avoid bumps and stuff, it does give us an edge. And, it's the same with people in the backcountry saying, well, I could follow a snow bike through the trees and this and that on a sled. And, most people have an extremely challenging time trying to keep up to even close to the pace that a snow bike can hold through tighter trees and stuff like that. Because we just really don't have to think as much, and we don't have as much fighting back and all that. So it was really neat to see. And that's all a part of, snow bikes coming up and having wins in the industry, and to see a race like that happen and the snow bikes to actually overall come out on top was truly awesome. Going to some of the hill climb races, it was kind of always the thing is the hill climbs, the bikes had a really good chance as well. But if there was too many straightaways that just straight up the sled could just make a huge gap within a certain amount of time on a straightaway, well, then the bikes kind of, were losing that battle. But if you kept, constant corners or whatever, then it was really hard to keep in front of the snow bikes. So
what's a day specifically on a snow bike more recently that stands out to you to be like, oh, that was unreal? Like when you were working with Red Bull and Ronnie Renner and those guys with that sort of stuff, or was it like more recent? Have you had like good days with like Brock or Cody in the backcountry? Like what stands out on a good snow bike day where you're like, man, we were hitting this and it was just awesome?
I mean, my best snow bike days has no cameras. I just leave and do my thing, and it does happen quite a bit. I don't film everything. I love my bro days when it's not all about cameras, because I love running through the backcountry and immediately hitting anything in my way, which is really hard to film. So The days I want to have fun, I'm not sitting there, oh, look at that jump, let's set up a camera. No, we're riding through it. I've already hit it while everyone's following, and they're just like, wow, where'd that come from? Maybe it's something I knew already, maybe it's not, but maybe I just figured it out there. But I have the most fun rolling into my kind of, epic untouched kind of zones, and it's just pillow, line, hip, cliff drop, whatever. And the more I can free ride it for my own inner self, the more fun I have. And that was the dream of snow bikes, being able to ride through the backcountry, be like, oh, there's a hip on a wall, and just being able to do it and land and ride away.
And just keep going. Yeah.
And just keep going. So like in the shorter track days, when we used to push the shorter tracks, they were better at jumping, but they weren't quite as good at getting there. You really had to work to get there. If you saw a jump, you might have to pack an in run, massage it, make sure you get enough speed at this so-called jump. But, the dream for me was free riding these things and having the power, the speed, and the traction all at once, just to hit free ride stuff and, stare at that pillow, make a different jump everywhere you turn around the corner. The terrain in front of you is different. What are you going to do with it? Well, that's me in a nutshell, is my art of riding and using little features, and maybe jumping out of a tree well and wheeling into something and jumping off and changing my angle and catching a downside of a log. Like that to me is all stuff you just cannot make up in life. And it's so rewarding to me.
One of the times that I can remember when we were filming, unfortunately you had to have a down day where you had to film, you had to contain yourself for a bit. The heli shoot, I think it was volume 10 for 509, was one of the first times we really put you in an element where there was multiple sledders and, high level sledders, springtime. And then here comes the snow biker. You were fairly new onto the scene, and we weren't sure how this whole thing was going to pair up. But you and I had a couple of film days to that point. We knew it was creative and easy to, work together and get some stuff done. But again, the heli shoot is always this next level of everyone's pushing that level to the next bar, and the gaps between doubles are that much bigger, and the heli's in the air and you're trying to, jump over the heli, and it's like, how is the snow bike going to come into it? And you and I talked the other day, it was just like, those clips from that volume 10, like years ago, still hold up to today, because they were like legit big airs that you were doing. Yeah. And I don't even know if you were confident what the bike was capable of back then.
I went into that shoot being invited in. Of course, like, I've worked hard to try to get invited into things like that. I tried to get into all these big things that sledders were already doing, but getting into that was like, literally, I am the one that stands out. I'm the one that's not supposed to be there. Everybody was a seasoned sledder. Everybody had done this before. We had to go in a day early, get to go spot your jumps, build your jumps, do your thing. Tomorrow, the heli's coming in, we're filming it all. So be ready, everybody. So I have to go into a zone I've never been in before, and I got to be around all these guys. Well, some of them already know the big jumps. Some of them are laid out already. They can feed off of those, and they're also trying to make new ones. But really, I had to go in there and make the snow bike look not like a turd. And, I really had to step it up, and I didn't want to leave that shoot being like, oh, well, Reeg's wet small and whatever. So there was a lot of pressure on me for sure. I tried to feed off what the sleds were doing a little bit, pay attention, but not every jump that a sled does, a snow bike can do, whether it's, I can't get the speed or whatever, or they have an uphill run in I can't keep speed for. So I got to decide, can I do what they already did off of one of those jumps, or do I just have to find different things? And most of the time I do have to find something different. And I open my mind and thinking sand dunes, thinking big and ways I can get my bike to hold speed into certain things, and maybe have the train fall away so I'm actually, up high enough and everything. And, luckily, I think 2 to 3 jumps really worked out for me that I spent time in. They weren't what sleds were jumping at all. They were my own things I found. And it was a total win for me to be able to build something like that and step out with everybody. I think everybody was amazed at what we really pulled off as far as the snow bike end.
The athletes were stoked on what they were watching. Like, there's that one clip where the heli kind of comes with you across the lake, and you're lining it up in just like 4th gear into this thing or whatever it was. And then you kind of jump over some smaller spruce or smaller trees. And then you kind of you whip it out a little bit, and then you hip down to the landing. and like the athletes under you were just as stoked as you were, and just as
Yeah.
stoked as I was behind the camera to see what this bike was doing. And I think everyone had their eyes open at that moment to be like, oh, okay, this thing's legit. It was pretty cool to see.
Because I don't think all the sledders really understood what a snow bike really could do and the rules that the snow bike plays in. So when I looked at that little, wind lip, I just had to carve in a little spot for my ski at a weird angle. I mean, a sled would be looking square at it. I kind of ran with it and kind of carved it in so it went at a right angle, and I had to use the lay of the land to catch me the right way. And all those rules are different than a snowmobile. So for them watching me and how I was trying to make things happen and use the terrain to work with me is something I really had to do. And, reading what trajectory I was getting, how high I really was going to get with the speed I can only use. And, even for me, it was huge wins, and just coming off and everybody being excited to see me figure out how to get that snow bike elevated was rad.
Well, I think you mentioned like you kind of have to look at the mountains a little bit differently. And I think that's true for most times we're filming. That really helps us, because I think then we can just knock out shots. It's just like you and I could just be like, do you think you can go from there to that transition? On a sled, it'd be like, well, the run out would then throw me in the trees. You can't do that. But on a bike, it's like, well, you just carve out a bit.
Yeah, things that are leaned, even on takeoffs, I still don't have to look that lean is going to straighten me out. Yeah. So it is still a different aspect to look at it. So just the jibby little things is what interests me, and things that you would not normally think is even jumpable as a bike can come in some of those angles.
But in saying that, like how legitimate it was, and like what really opened my eyes was this, like Turcotte was hitting this like uphill run in with like, you could carry a lot of speed, and he was jumping like up to the same height as a helicopter, and it was kind of a whip jump, and then he'd like hip down on the landing. And I can't remember if you were like, I don't know if we could do this, or we thought like, Reagan, you try it, but you hit that one. And I think the first clip, the back end kind of caught up to you and you kind of nose dove a bit, but then you were just like, this is doable. You're like, I'm going to do this too. So it was like a big legit sled jump that you were like, I'm going to do this one. And I think we had to pack the in-run maybe a little bit or something, but I think you nose dove the one, and then the next one you just like knew what the bike was going to do, and you just rode it out, and it was like, holy crap.
I actually think that one was one that I built all myself when you guys were building the first day, and I disappeared and I found this thing, and it was like a way tall in-run. Huge, so it was untypical for me.
Yeah.
I had a 520 at the time, which was my saving grace. I had a big bore 520, so it held some speed, but that was the biggest, most uphill run in I had ever built. And I sat there that day and stomped it in and packed it in, and you guys were all ready to leave, and you had to come find me. And I was sitting there by myself, packing in a massive snow bike jump. And even to me, I was like, my mind says this is the one, but I didn't even know if I was going to be able to jump it at that capacity, because it was a huge uphill run in. Luckily, I was able to let it sit for a night and kind of set up the in run. And I mean, it was full on packed from the valley before. I had come down a hill, swoop through, and up the other side. And
so that was actually
the first. It was actually my own jump, and it was massive for a snow bike. I do believe I hit it first, and it went successful. It was the second or third time I went to hit it, and it had made a hole right near the top, but the very top was solid ice, so it just made a dip right before the top. And of course, I'm wide open on the snow bike, asking for everything, left that lip and just caught the top bit. And I was flying through the air as fast as snow bike would go, fully on the panic rev limiter, trying to level it out. And I could tell it was not coming back. I had so much energy going that way. And it was the first time I'd actually ever jumped off of a snow bike too. And being a professional dirt biker, you do not jump off your snow bike, because normally I'm not above snow. I'm above dirt, right? So that's a big no. So it was a forced jump off at 100 and something feet, and to just kind of pin dive through the snow and the bike land beside me and me dust myself off and pick it up. And I was just like,
oh, this is sweet.
Wow. My mind said I was pretty much dying right there, because I'm used to landing on the dirt. And that's it. Back to the hospital we go. Yeah. But, that also, as big as it was and gnarly, it was, had a crash there, got up, dusted myself off, went and fixed the little hole, went to hit it again. So the whole thing was just still made me smile. It wasn't like a crash that ruined my day or nothing, but
yeah, that was a really cool day. Cool. That still stands out to me when I look at those shots. It's just like, that was so cool. And we still go out to today, and it's just like, it still impresses me the drops you can do off axis, the double drops we did a few years ago on those super deep April days that we had back in your riding zone was just like, lining one drop off, and then you're kind of like changing axis and then dropping off the other. Like the dimensions, the off axis slopes just do not slow you down like they do on a sled. And it's really cool to film because it's like you can get so creative and be like, you think you can line that and that up? And it's like, let's try it,
Yeah. Yeah. It's the creativity has been all time fun, as everything from fitting through something skinny to off camber to landing on things that don't have the same rules. When I was riding snow machine, I'd have to have, plan A, plan B, plan C, and plan D before you do anything because, if this tosses me that way, how am I going to deal with it? If that tosses me this way, if I don't make it up here, where am I going down through? Those are all things you ask yourself on a snowmobile 24/7. What's my next plan? Because if you don't have one, you're in trouble.
So you've been working with, we mentioned like you basically can't have too much power on the snow bike. It's nice if you had, like 20 more horse, 30 more horse, whatever. And you've dabbled in turbos and big bores and different things like that. What's your program right now? What are you working on for more power?
Yeah. So this year I took a different take on, I guess, the power aspect of things. We've done, like say, big bores, we've done turbos, we've done all kinds of things to make more power out of our bikes. So this year I teamed up with Lloyd's Performance in Southern Idaho, and they're doing something pretty neat. For one, their background is hill climbing, so fast bikes, uncompromised, uphill,
and super
don't really
fast
care
bikes.
about much else.
These are high horsepower bikes.
So what I decided to go with this year, I mean, I've had big bores plenty. This year I decided not to big bore. I wanted a stock feeling motor, less vibration, hopefully more longevity. And Lloyd's had a package that, was proving to build some big horsepower with a stock bore. I really didn't know a ton about it other than everyone I talked to that had anything to do with throwing a leg over one of these motors had nothing but good to say. And you don't really think that, you're going to get that much power out of a stock 450 because they're already, squeezed pretty hard for power and they are fast bikes. But it's amazing the difference that they found without changing the piston. I'm on a stock KTM piston. I'm running 91 pump gas, which is nice. I don't have to deal with race gas. And I'm still over 70 horse from, it started at about 58. So quite a big jump, not just in horsepower, but the rideability of it. It's bigger throttle bodies, a lot more flow in the head, custom intakes, exhaust. So it really has to do with getting the air in and out of that thing more efficiently. And the bike revs up like crazy. It has this very rideable electric feeling power that's just right there. And it brings you more back to feeling like you're on the motocross track with your touchy little bike than your typical snow bike that is kind of lethargic and running cold and just a little bit doggy. And you're just out there pinned doing whatever you can do with it. So it's just bringing another aspect to it, having this bike that is just so much more lively and it wants to rev to the moon. It really likes running on the top end of the RPM range. So it's really neat to do something different this year. And so far I'm loving it.
It feels like we're getting to the point where snow bikes have become this like really well-balanced machine, power, rideability, ergonomics, all that sort of stuff. Do you think we're going to be watching this podcast in 10 years and being like, what were we talking about? There's so much to wring out of this sport still. And what we're riding in 2024 was so archaic.
I hope what we're riding now is archaic because that means that we're just riding something so much better in another 10 years. And that's all I can hope. I love where we're at. I think looking back to my dreams, 12 years ago and to look where we're at now, it's absolutely mind blowing. Even the first 5 years, I felt the goals that we had just went doosh, 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 right up there so fast. I couldn't even believe it myself how we went from not being a sport at all to just this industry growing so fast. So
yeah, it's so cool to see.
Love being a part of that and just like knowing that I had some influence on that and stuff like just really makes me happy. I'm glad, I took those decisions when they weren't straightforward and, kind of jumped in the unknown because it's just such a neat process to be a part of.
We dove right into the snow bike aspect and you did a very good job in your introduction. It was very quick of you did motocross to freestyle motocross to snow biking and all that. You still ride a lot in the summer, don't you? And I want to bring this up because you and I were talking late summer and you entered into a master's race there in Vernon and ended up cleaning up and you won it, didn't you?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm just a real rider. I love riding. I don't think I need to be the best at one thing or anything. I just love riding. as much as anything, I like pushing my own skill and being good. That doesn't mean just motocross or just snow biking or anything. So I obviously grew up in Vernon from my hills. I grew up riding all these trails behind my house. I did end up getting more into motocross in my life and chasing that down. But I mean, at the end of the day, riding's riding. I spend a lot more time nowadays in the trails because they're just right here, and it's just easier for me to get out and spend hours of riding. And let's face it, most of my real buddies ride off-road and not motocross. So me being able to go out with my friends and spend time on the trails, but I still ride them like a moto guy. I'm out there to push my fitness and ride hard and just ride as hard as I can. I never really cared about winning off-road races or even racing much for off-road races, but at the end of the day, of course, I want to be the fastest guy and or, hold that respect. So even though I don't race much in the off-road world, I did take a couple opportunities, and I've been really working on my fitness and stuff and just trying to be an enthusiast that rides at a high level. So this year I did decide to enter the race that's kind of in my home turf here where I grew up in all the trails, the Squealing Pig. And I was a little injured going into it. My wrist was really not happy. Anybody that knows me, I've got massive wrist injury from over the years and stubbornness of not going to the hospital. So some days the wrist is good, some days not. I entered that race totally injured and my body wasn't happy, but I really did want to just join in and race anyways. I was half on the fence of riding an age group class, and my buddy talked me into racing, the top class, the masters class, because he said, you don't want to start behind a bunch of people and just do it that way. And like, no, I really don't, you know me. So I didn't pre-run the course. I didn't do anything. I was too sore. I was just trying to ice my wrist so I could get through the race. And, it was dusty. So I did know there was a couple things I needed to do, and that was A, get the start.
Whole shot.
And then B, just run loose and try not to tighten up and run as smooth as I could. So, I lined up my motocross experience. Luckily, they did like a motocross start on a bit of a motocross track before it went into the woods. And I nailed the start. I had the biggest smile going through the dusty motocross track because I know nobody had a chance once it was dusty like that. And I went off in the trees in the lead, and man, I was the happiest guy ever. And I was riding my 500 EXE street legal bike, which is obviously most people won't even choose to ride one of those bikes off road for any real reasons.
You still have a horn on it, don't you?
It's big.
It's still got a horn and everything.
On.
Yeah,
that horn was on for 80% of that race, because if I saw anybody in the distance, that horn was just going off, and they'd be pulled over by the time I got there.
So you got the whole shot on a 500. And you sent me the video because you just berm turned out of there ahead of anyone else, and you were just like gone. But managed to keep the lead ahead. And what was it? 3.5 hours you were on, or
both 3 hours and 5 minutes, I think, is what it ended up being. I did have somebody catch up to me a little ways into the race and give me some pressure. So I wasn't really sure. He passed me, and then he went down. I caught him, and I knew that I can't ride my full pace for 3 hours. So I had to settle into what I knew I could do. I let him go. I didn't really know if he was in front of me the whole time or not. So I kind of went into the race, not really knowing from there, because a lot can happen off road. You just don't know all the time. Yeah. And about the third lap, I was starting to get tired. I was starting to blister all over. My legs were cramping. And even I was like, holy, is this ever taking a toll? There wasn't a lot of places to rest. I thought I was in pretty good shape, but my hands peeled apart. I hit a couple bumps, and I wasn't holding on as good as I could have been. And I just felt my hands peel wide open. And so I was going into lap 3 pretty much okay with if I had to quit, if there was another lap. I didn't think I was going to be able to hold on again, but I pushed through for the rest of that lap. And then my hands started to the pain started to go away a little bit. So then as soon as I could hold on, and then I picked up a bit more speed, I just came to the lap there, and I asked if I was done, and they're like, no, you're going out again.
You got one more.
I'm like, oh, great. And well, at that time I decided, well, at least I'm going to start this lap. We'll see what happens. But I actually started picking up more speed in the fourth lap, and carried some speed. And it wasn't until I think I got to the checkpoint there, and I was talking to the guy there that I know, and I asked him what position I was in, because I was a little unsure. I just kept running my race, and he said I was in first as far as he knew. And I was just like, no, are you sure? And he's like, well, I'm pretty sure. I'm like, well, you would know. But I'm like, somebody had passed me at some point, but I don't know what happened. So
crazy.
I just kept on the gas, got to the finish. I won it. I was the happiest guy ever. My hands were just torched. But no, I just so glad I put the effort in. And really, it's just for me. I've tried racing off-road races before. I've never put together like full-on good races or come out that much on top. So to be at the age of 44 when I did that and to come out with a number one off-road,
yeah, dude,
was
so cool.
The highlight of my year.
I was stoked for you when we were texting
more, so.
back and forth. I was just like, oh, dude, so sweet. Yeah. And you look at that motocross picture in the background right now, the old 39 from your old motocross days. You're like, that's so cool.
Yeah. Yeah. That photo is like pretty much when I quit racing, I think when I was 19 and was just transitioning into freestyle. So that was my last days on the motocross track.
Your freestyle stories crack me up. And we got to share some of like your highlights, because take us through that. Like, that was the Crusty Demons of Dirt days when FMX was just blowing up, and Cali was the place to be. And like, what was that scene like for you to be a part of? That would have been like a dream come true for any of these listeners out there being like, man, if I could have been at any era in motocross or in FMX, that would have been the place to be at that time. What was it like?
Oh man, it's just
like,
I couldn't believe it. I mean, obviously I was about 18 or 19 when freestyle was starting. I was, that guy in the photo still racing. There was a couple halftime events that happened at our motocross courses. So, I learned how to do hill clickers. I learned how to do Cordovas, and all of a sudden I was winning some money at the halftime races. But I mean, really then that turned into freestyle. Freestyle started having some events. So I was like, well, I'm ready to win these halftime events. I got a couple tricks, and my buddy Andy Bell ended up getting me and Rick Heddle into the Fresno, California freestyle event. So here go three Canadians down to Fresno, California to go see what freestyle is all about, like a real event. Let's go compete. And we showed up to that event. It was first day ever. We saw metal ramps, and we're just like in an arena for one, these big landings that were like this. Not like this. No safety. Just like this.
You're fully committed.
And there's a metal ramp to take off on, and we had no clue. No clue what was going to happen there.
Was that the time you took Andy Bell's dad's motorhome, like $200,000 motorhome down there? Or was that another time?
Well, that was a little later because we had to get through this event, and unfortunately, Andy ended up spinning off the ramp and not getting good drive. He ended up decking, landing, and breaking both his legs that day. Not a good start for him in that direction. Myself, I survived practice. I survived the morning media, and I went to do the event, and I ended up third.
Oh, no way. In your first event down in Cali.
My first event down there, I got a third, a podium, and it just set me in the direction to believe I could keep with it. So we did a couple contests, and then shortly after the Vans Triple Crown was coming around, and there's only so many people back then, the OG kind of crew. So I kind of fell into that fairly quick, winning a couple things. So I got invited to the Vans Triple Crown, and so did Andy and Rick Heddle. So somehow Andy talked his dad into letting us borrow his few $100,000 motorhome bus, and we had about a month we had to go to California to do the 3 events with 1 weekend off. So the next problem we had to figure out was, well, how do we get the bikes down there with the motorhome? We didn't really have a trailer. So we took my 92 lifted step side Chevy with roll bar lights and, regular cab, and
fully redneck.
Stuffed the 3 bikes in the back of the truck and put a tow hitch on the front of the lifted truck and put it behind the motorhome.
And what kind of tow hitch did you use for flat towing this 92 Chevy? Like, what were you kids using?
Well, don't ask me, because I was working as a logger at the time. So I was in camp logging while these monkeys were setting up my truck and getting it ready to be towed. I literally had quit my job that week to leave to go for this California job. So when I got done work, I just went straight to Andy's house. They had everything ready. I jumped in the motorhome, and we just started heading south. So the motorhome had a backup camera you could see at the front.
Oh, you guys
of course, us as kids, though, we all had emptied out about every piece of stereo equipment we could find between all of our ownings, and we filled that whole bus with stereo equipment and everything and made it our own for a while.
Yeah.
We made it to about Portland.
Then what happened?
We're going through Portland, and I walk up front and like, oh, let's check the truck. So we turn on the camera. Andy looks at it. He's driving. He turns it off. And I was just like, wait a second. And like turned it back on, and you could only see half the truck. And then you keep it on for a little bit. The truck goes, and it's just, we're going across the Portland like bridges, like over
a big
the
interstate.
water. all those closed off, overpasses, and my truck is swinging from one side to the other behind the motorhome. Work now can't stop there because there is nowhere to pull off. You're in between barricades everywhere. So we're like trying to get to somewhere we can do something about it on the other side. Andy slows down, the truck just slams in the back of the motorhome, and we're trying to get pulled over and assess the situation. And we get out, we finally get stopped. There is one bolt, mostly backed off, holding that truck to the back of the motorhome. And there would have gone my truck, our 3 bikes, and all of our hopes and dreams right there. Right off the bridge into the water.
1/2 inch bolt holding the whole hopes and dreams together.
Yeah, and it was coming apart. The other ones obviously broke. I don't know if they had more than 2 really to start with, but one side broke and then there was only one left. So frame was a little stretched out. She wasn't lasting long. I'm pretty sure in the next half an hour or way less, there definitely wouldn't be a truck.
Done. So fast forward, you guys make it down to Cali, the Vans Triple Crown. And who are you brushing shoulders with? Like, who are you hanging out with back in the day? Like, who was around?
All the big
scene?
players were there. Of course, being the Canadians, we were kind of the odd people out. And, it's a kind of a tight-knit California group. And then you got these Canadians. So it was a little bit different. Trying to think back into going into a few rounds. There were some really solid people, though, that the Disslers we hung out with a lot. Everybody was really good. It's just being Canadian and getting into all that is just totally different, right? You didn't grow up in the scene, nothing like that, but it was all really neat. Us as Canadians, it felt like we could get together and practice and maybe develop some new tricks back then, and all of a sudden show up at an event and to be doing stuff different. We had our own ways of doing things. Of course, we could watch movies and everything else that everybody else put out there, and we could learn from them. But anything we did, nobody really learned from us because we're in Canada doing our thing. So it's kind of neat to show up at some of these events and we had different tricks and we're doing things a little bit different. And people took notice to that because everybody was focused on the set of tricks that, that they were doing down there. And we just, let's do a reverse saran wrap and let's do something different here and let's try this. So it was kind of fun for that part of it. And, the Vans Triple Crown was cool. I did have, some crashes. You try to push hard. But the thing that stands out to me was the round in San Francisco. I still had a crash trying to kind of push it hard there, but I ended up in the main, ended up third, I believe, kicking Deegan off the hot seat at that point. And for me, it was
cool.
a very cool experience to be at that level of an event. I did take a podium, and someone like Deegan at that point was very profile rider in my minds and everything. And to be able to get even just that podium and be ahead of some of the key players, just once again, just kind of shows me I'm going in the right direction, and I'm not just this kid from Canada. I am just this kid from Canada, but I had the skills to put against people.
You're backing it up. How many people were at those events?
Oh, geez, I can't really even remember. They were quite big events. So
they were huge.
There.
Yeah,
they were huge. I mean,
were you nervous going into like a huge arena like that, traveling all the way down there from the States? Small kid from doing shows at Lumbee or Enderby, and here you are down there, and you're just like, what am I doing here?
Yeah, definitely nervous to a certain extent, but the first few events did help me realize that the way I do things, I'm right there at that level, and it's not just the jumping ramps at that level, but those guys knew how to free ride as well, which in Canada you don't have that much free riding, so there's times where I had to go do freestyle to fit in with these, or free riding to fit in with these guys, and I had to go to Ocotillo Wells and stuff like that and try to hang with these guys. So maybe those are some of the times where I'm more nervous, as these guys are used to more of that stuff and I'm not. And if you want to hang with the big boys, you can't just have the ramp skills and not everything else. So we went to Ocotillo Wells the one time for Thanksgiving, and pretty much it was a outdoor open invite competition for Thanksgiving long weekend. So all the freestylers were invited out there to about the same area. And it was just more or less a self-judge by a couple of the industry people that were out there. We just did it for fun. Who did the biggest jump? Who did the coolest line? That kind of thing. And after the whole weekend, I was voted as one of the top riders, which was huge. That was more important to me in that aspect, because it was like crazy mud jumps and different things and stuff I wasn't used to, but I just kind of had to take the motocross skills and stuff and just just apply it and be confident and try not to kill myself out there too at the same route. So
speaking of killing
that
yourself,
was
you shared some wild stories, and you're beat up from the years. You're half bionic now, but what are the stories you share is just like blowing up your foot or heel or something, ankle, whatever, and you're just like, I gotta get home. Like, I gotta get out of here. You're just a kid, and you're just like, oh my gosh, like wild motocross stories.
Yeah, well, I shattered my feet a couple times when I was down in California. Both times were really bad. First time, completely shattered my foot trying to make Metz back in the day. It was kind of one of the last tricks I needed on my list in order to try to take a win at one of these events. I was learning everything. I was coming up with new tricks. I was really on a roll, and Mike Metzger had made his McMetz, which is put both feet through the bars and then let go of both hands and wrap your feet around. So you're letting go of your bike while you're kind of over the bars. And I had it in my mind, like I needed to get that trick under my belt. And unfortunately, the day I really did go after it was a little bit windy and stuff like that. And I went and tried it. And it kind of blew my bike out from underneath me just enough to throw me off balance. And I kind of got back onto my bike, but I landed sideways and stomped my foot on the ground. And even though I rode out of it completely, I totally blew my foot up. Beyond repair.
Rode out.
Like just,
Jesus.
I rode up against the fence. I leaned against the fence for a couple seconds, trying to, decide what really happened there. I realized it was not good and rode over to the truck, fell off my bike, and Metzger came over right away and he was like, well, what's happening? I'm like, oh, I just blew up my whole foot, I think. He's like, well, you didn't even crash. I'm like, oh, I stomped it on the ground. And I pulled my boot off and my foot was hanging straight down. Like there was just nothing holding it at all. So pretty much was just like, let's go. Luckily, the hospital was right across the street. So I went there, but being a Canadian kid and having Canadian insurances and stuff, they literally just stabilized me a bit and sent me back to Metzger's house.
With his
my insurance company said that I had to just fly home to deal with it.
And so you're this kid with his blown up foot.
I was 19-year-old. I had a shattered foot beyond repair, beyond belief shattered. And they just sent me home to deal with my pain overnight and take a regular flight
Commercial
home. And
flight
I knew nothing. So I didn't argue it. I just kind of went with the punches. And yeah, some of the gnarliest pain I've ever went through in my life trying to get through those few days to get home.
Yeah, dude, you're pretty strong to be able to put up with something like that to get all the way home and then have to deal with it. That's wild. But you're here to tell the story, and you still
it's all part of it, right?
You still do some cross country running to stay in shape, and I don't know how you do it with the feet the way they look, man, because they're so the poor things
I'm
have
stubborn.
been that's it. I think that's the only
mind
thing
over matter is really all that is that sound of that doctor saying I'll never run again and I'll be lucky if I even ever walk again. That's fuel to the fire for me. So every time I run, I'm winning.
Yeah, you're doing it.
Even if I'm limping for the next 2 days, I'm doing it still. And it's not sitting on the couch and not doing it. So
you're an inspiration to a lot
me,
of people.
in order to stay at this level at all, you have to keep your body going. I want to be at a high level. I don't want to pretend I'm at a high level. So, even with all the injuries, just do what I can to keep that mind strong. It's not just the body, but the mind is what needs to be there too. So.
And you've been training hard. What are you training for? What's 2024 got in store for Reags this year?
Training for life. I really do like being fit enough that I can take many things on and stuff. And that's been my mentality. I don't know if I'm ever training for anything in specific, but I've learned that, in order to be at this level, you just have to have a lifestyle that's, in that direction. So, every few days I have to feel like I'm doing something to a high level, or else I'm kind of sitting around stir crazy. And that's just how I am. So it's not that I'm training for anything in particular, but training to be the best I can anyways. But I always have things, in my mind and the next steps and what I want to do. And, it's just all about trying to be ready for when that time comes.
Yeah. What do you got in store snowbiking wise this winter? Like, what are you thinking? What do you want to accomplish? What do you want to do? I know you and I have talked about some different film ideas and stuff like that for 509, but like as a whole, is it just like getting these new mods figured out with a little bit more horsepower and getting that program just dialed entirely? So if anyone else contacts you about it, you're like, do this, this, and this. Is it like, Are you wanting to accomplish a couple of explore missions in your backyard that you still haven't done? Like, what do you want to accomplish this year in 2024 on the snow bike?
Yeah, well, I know like a lot of times I've been like, my accomplishments are mostly on film and all that. But I mean, with the role with Mountaintop, my role has changed a little bit. I'm a lot more active with Mountaintop, testing and all that kind of stuff. So there's times where I'm just out testing things and I'm giving feedback and all that. So a lot of my goals are to help Mountaintop and help them grow and help them to perfect. So a lot of my time is spent in that direction right now. In the backcountry, I always have goals, and it gets dictated a little bit on how are my bikes running, how solid are they, how are my kits working, what can I do anything more that I wasn't able to do last year, whether it be just the next level. Is there more like inverted 270 options, like all these things I dream of? Sometimes the power plants or whatever might keep me in reality for a little bit, but I've got lots of dreams of things I want to do. And as the kits get better and the setups get better, I slowly get to, take those taller ones off the list, I think. So,
Nice.
This year it's a little iffy. We waited for late snow, then we had a cold snap, and now we rain into Mountaintop. It feels like spring with no snow right now and warm temps. It's just weird, but that stuff happens. And
it's been a challenging winter, and I think everyone that's listening from across North America can attest. It's just like been a challenging winter, but it's still fun to get out there and explore, enjoy the fresh 100%. Air with your buddies, and just have a lot of fun. So I love
the exploring part, and that's really, I think, with where we're at now and the capabilities of this machine, and to realize that there's uncharted areas in my neck of the woods still that I haven't tried and done. And now that's just really all starting to interest me more because I realize how capable my machine is. So, stepping outside the box, I can only jump so many things for film and just feel like I'm doing something new all the time. But I mean, at the same route, I'm just trying to feed my passion. Where does that go? Forever, for the longest time, it was like, we got to make this cool enough so people just understand. Like, we just got to get out of the stigma of that they're just, a slow turd in the backcountry.
Right.
We've obviously, they can jump, they can descend, they can climb, they can all mountain. We can just put it that way. With what they have, they can all mountain really well. But there's always things, you have lower snow conditions like this. Well, it's a good time to test out other things like different ski designs and skags and what works better on crappy snow conditions, since we have some of that right now. Perfect some things on the setup, what does work, what doesn't work, and you just take advantage of what the changing conditions are out there, and that's how we push this sport forward, right?
Well, Reeg, I'm very excited for when we get to link up at some point this winter. Hopefully by then the snow will be corrected a little bit, and we'll be just getting creative behind the camera to make something for our viewers to hoot and holler over, much like that Volume 10 heli shoot day when you just like threw down, because that still stands out as one of the most epic days.
Yeah. Oh, for me, for sure. Just so much happened in those 2 days, and even just dealing with the helicopter, because I hadn't helicopter filmed up to then. So it wasn't even just that, but just the people around me and all the idols and icons. It was heavy hitters, just the whole thing.
You fit right
much
in.
As I didn't want to
right
be
there.
The guy, at the short end of the stick going in there, it was really fun being, for me, it's really fun being the guy that is maybe underestimated. And I do have to work at it a bit. So I think that's what drew me into this is,
challenge.
Going into the unknown and making it work and, pushing all these things when nobody else has to that level. So.
Well, I think everyone's happy you're doing it and you're the guy behind the scenes pushing all this technology because it shows. Well, Reeg, thanks so much for hopping on for an hour plus with us. I think this is just dabbled into your crusty days and your Cali days of FMX, and we're gonna do a whole podcast just on that because there's so many stories that you share that I'm like, we're just scratching the surface.
A lot to dig into, there's for sure. Ever since I was young, I just kept pushing forward to more opportunities and not dwelling on the old ones, and just more doors open, more places, and done so many things in my life, and I've forgotten so many things in my life. But even sometimes talking to you, you just dig those things up, and I come up with a story out of the archives. And
so good.
It's been such a neat ride. I even with injuries and everything I've done in my life, I mean, I wouldn't take any of it back, not at all. It's just it's been a very interesting ride. I'm glad I'm not just decided to go to a 9 to 5 24/7. So
All right.
Step outside the box and chase that passion.
Yeah, that's good advice from the Reagan Sieg. Reagan, thanks so much for joining us on the podcast today. Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you in the snow, Reag.
Thanks everybody. Thank you, Michael.